Yes, it is my last Sunday and my last sermon here at UCY. I've been in the process of retiring for almost a year now. And I think I'm ready to finally move on from being retiring to being retired. You celebrated me well this year, and I'm grateful. And I hope that this has also been a chance to celebrate UCY as a church and all we do. But of course, there's a little wistfulness, a hint of grief, and a sense of endings on a day like today. But as we often say here, that's what a university church is. People come, people go, but the church goes on. Grief in itself is not bad. Grief tells us that what's ended was important. We don't just move on, we stop, and we allow ourselves to feel bad for a little while, because the time we had together was important. As we read in our summer book group this week, grief is the love that remains after the ending. As Christians, we know that goodbyes are not the end. We remain connected through Christ no matter where we are. Every time we worship, we're together again. And I will continue to pray for you, and I hope that you will pray for me. We've gone through a lot at UCY over my 18 years here. And I do grow a little wistful thinking of all those who passed through here over those years and all the stuff we got up to, good and bad. I think of 18 sets of student deacons. I think of Tom and Aaron and Annabelle and Yang and Abby and Will and Shao and Bobo and Louie and Abby and so many others. And I think of the pillars of our church, Diane and Richard, Bill and Heather, and so many others. 18 amazing choir directors and organists and the music they made. I think around 20 great divinity students who learned and led us here. And perhaps most of all, my partners in crime, three wonderful associate pastors, Callista and Candace and Jen. Each with such amazing gifts, who gave so much to us. 18 or more versions of catechesis, probably some better than others. At least 3 Patel Basin floods. 18 Easter extravaganzas and brunches, 18 lessons and carol services, around 1,000 Sunday worship services. And I also remember beloved friends we lost, like DeWitt Zeus and Joe Frater, Rob Burr, and Heather Spawn, and many others. I remember how we went through COVID and those confusing times together, but amazingly how you stuck with it, with our little Zoom community, which became an anchor to us in a time of storm. And then somehow we came back here slowly. Remember masks and humming. When they would let us sing, we would hum along with the songs. It's crazy. And perhaps stronger than ever. So don't get me started reminiscing or telling stories. There are too many. I even have a student here from my days at Bucknell University a long time ago who was on our chapel committee. So it's sad for me it's coming to an end. But sadness is not my main emotion today. Rather, it's gratitude and celebration. I love this ministry, I love the ministry we do together. I feel gratitude for the welcome I was shown 18 years ago, and how hospitality and welcome define this church. You took me in, you adjusted to my quirks, and you told me you liked my cooking. What more could I ask for? But hospitality and welcome is not just a nice thing to do, it defines this church. One of you told Jenny B this week that after the time of estrangement from the church, it began to believe, perhaps in part because of UCY, that the church could be genuinely welcoming of everyone. You showed me that welcome, and you showed it to so many others over the years. You showed me that welcome isn't just a motto, it doesn't come easily. It's something we have to work at continually, to audit ourselves, to ask what barriers are we putting in people's way. You taught me the real welcome is something never fully achieved, but with every new group of students and staff at the fall, it's something to start all over again. You showed me the way you support LGBTQ and women's leadership here, how you welcomed and accommodated friends like Lee McCow, Daryl Liddell, 2 trans choir directors, people from across the globe and across the theological spectrum. You have been amazing. I'm grateful today for UCY itself. It would be easy to take it for granted, and I think we sometimes do. But it is a special, unique, perhaps fragile kind of church. When you welcomed me here in 2008, UCY was still a church in transition after a major transformation in 2005. You then built what we then became, a different kind of church. I think we forget sometimes what our church is about. A church primarily focused on students. And we love each other and all our students in all the enthusiasms and awkwardness and brilliance of the college years. We celebrate student victories and mourn defeats. We are a church defined by ecumenism, the sense of welcoming all Christians, semi-Christians, non-Christians, wanderers, questioners, and none of you folks entered by the church. A church with a particular, peculiar liturgy and music program. A teaching church committed to training seminarians and musicians in how to do church. A church rooted in progressive Protestantism. A traditional liberal Christian voice at a time when other voices are claiming to define Christianity. And of course, a church in Yale. And as you taught me, prepositions are important. Not a church of Yale, not a church at Yale, but a church in Yale. Please don't forget the wonderful, peculiar mission that you have. I chose for our text today 2 examples of scriptural encouragement for this time of transition that I want to leave you with. In Matthew 5, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says to the crowd following him, "You are the salt of the earth, and you are the light of the world." Looking at the Sermon on the Mount again, what struck me was how much of the sermon isn't really about Jesus talking about himself or even about God. Most of it is about you, those to whom he was speaking. Blessed are you, the merciful, the meek, the mourners, the seekers of righteousness. Jesus turns the message inside out and tells us about God by telling us about how God sees us. Jesus turns towards the crowd, turns towards us and says, "It's you." I was listening to it anew and thinking, me? You talking to me? No, it's you. You are the salt. That invaluable spice for the world that makes the unpalatable palatable, that preserves, cuts the bitterness, and regulates the body. It's you. Whom? Yes, you. You are the light. When all the world is stumbling and fumbling, unseen, you show the way. When truth seems gray or vague or fuzzy, you shine brightly. Yes, we gather to worship the God of grace and glory of Christ who's become flesh in our lives. But in this scripture, Jesus turns the worship back on us and says, "It is you, filled with God's Spirit. It is you that are the salt and the light. It is you that are the joy and the life." The gospel isn't only about Jesus, it's about what Jesus draws out of us. Jesus looks at the crowd and sees a people transformed in this ragged crowd. He sees a people filled with gentle power, with love, mercy, and grace. You, yes, you are the salt and light of the world. You make this world bearable, beautiful, and hopeful. And that's what I'm seeing here at UCY. It's not really about me, it's about you. And this church is now in your hands, as it always has been. As you welcomed and trained me 18 years ago, so you will train new leaders with new energy and gifts. Some of you said to me that you were a little discouraged as my past semester over the search and the pause. The coming year will be an incredible opportunity to go deeper into what UCY is and can be. You will have strong, caring, mature leadership and a chance to imagine UCY into the future. This is not a setback. This is an invitation and an opportunity. I've watched you for 18 years. I feel you even longer. I know how humble and unprepossessing you are. But I've seen what you actually do in your lives, how you live, and the depth and power of what you're capable of. How much you sacrifice to serve others, how deep your faith is, especially in tough times. In 2 Timothy, Paul writes to his friend, "I remind you to rekindle the gift of God that is within you. For God does not give us a spirit of cowardice, but rather a spirit of power and love and of self-discipline." What a message for this this moment, in this country. God did not give us a spirit of cowardice. When I came here, you taught me that UCY should be prophetic, but not partisan. Striving always for justice and compassion, but not giving into division or dehumanization. It's very, very hard to do, but you showed me how it can be done. And now is the time when God asks Christians to move prophetically and beyond fear and courage. Jenny's told us over again this year. To ask ourselves hard questions about what we are ready to do at this time. Am I ready to defend my neighbor when the masked men come for them? Am I willing to stand up when my trans colleagues refuse health care or citizenship? Have I prepared? Do I have a lawyer's number in my phone? You should. Have I joined a network of support that is ready to respond when the SUVs and the darkened windows come down my street? Am I ready for the Spirit to speak through me when people talk about Christianity in a way I know isn't true? And am I ready to take ownership of this UCY community I love and see it through the coming transition? I know you have it. Not a spirit of cowardice, but a spirit of moral courage. As Chaplain Nathan Selfield often says to us, you got this. Don't worry. You got this. God did not give us a spirit of cowardice, but rather a spirit of power and of love. So don't be afraid to experiment with UCY. It was an experiment 20 years ago. And together, we turned it into something solid, but solid should never become stagnant. As students' religious identities rapidly change, are we meeting them where they are? Who out there needs us that we're not reaching? Are we trying out new things liturgically and musically? How can we make worship and Christianity itself more accessible and welcoming? And are we growing spiritually and theologically? How can we be deeper and more loving and more courageous? How can we love and challenge Yale from within? Yes, a church like this one is unique and rare, but it does not need to be delicate. But it cannot be challenged and changed. We used to say that UCY should be a place where everyone gets to be uncomfortable some of the time, but no one has to be uncomfortable all the time. Are we ready for a little discomfort? And do we invite it? When I preached at Marquand Chapel for their service honoring was retiring in April, I would close with this story I'd like to read it here. It's a scene from a rather cheesy, adultish kids movie from 2004 called Millions, directed by Danny Boyle. You can forget most of the plot, but know that it's about Damien, who is 7 years old, and whose mother has died. And since her death, Damien has developed a perhaps unhealthy but hilarious fixation on the saints. He's memorized the names of the dates for all the saints. And in a touch of magical realism, a number of them appear to him in hilarious asides. And his question to each of them is, have they met Saint Maureen in heaven, his mother? At the end of the film, as the plot comes to its head, Damien is alone by a train track when suddenly his mother appears. And their conversation goes like this. Damien says, oh, I know you're only a dream, but I don't care. It's nice to see you, even if it's just a dream. Please, will you talk to me? And his mother says, 5 minutes, okay? Now don't interrupt. I'm dead. I know what I'm talking about. Okay, about me. You're not to worry about me. You have been worried about me, haven't you? I'm fine. Damien, you need to remember there's almost always enough good around the world to keep it going. You just have to have a bit of faith in them. If you've got faith in people, that makes them stronger. And you've got enough faith to sort all of you out. That's what I'm counting on you. And Damien says, I haven't really been worried about you. I've just been sleeping. And his mother says, that's all right. Then Damien says, are you really a saint? And his mother says, well, the criteria are very strict. It's not just a case of doing good and all that. You do have to do an actual miracle. But I'm in there, of course I am. And Damien asks, what was your miracle? And his mother says, don't you know? It Tracy. And divine minds with Gates.